Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're building something peaceful in Minecraft while I tell you about a workplace nightmare that turned into the most satisfying takedown I've ever read. Because when your coworker is literally poisoning your lunch to climb the corporate ladder, we're not talking about office politics anymore. We're talking about attempted murder with a side of ambition. They basically built their own downfall, one contaminated meal at a time. This one starts with mysterious stomach problems and ends with someone in handcuffs, but the journey between those 2 points is absolutely wild. You've got hidden cameras, forged emails, and a twist that proves sometimes the best revenge is just letting criminals be stupid enough to leave evidence everywhere. So let me take you back to when everything seemed normal, back when our narrator thought the worst part of their day was just another boring lunch in the break room. I'd been grinding towards senior partner at my law firm for 3 solid years. Late nights, weekends, missed birthdays, the whole corporate sacrifice package. I was one of 3 associates competing for the spot, and honestly, I thought I had it in the bag. My case win rate was spotless, my billable hours were insane, and the senior partners kept dropping hints that I was their favorite. Life was stressful, but good, you know. I had a clear path forward, a timeline, a plan. Then my stomach started staging a full rebellion. It started small, just some nausea here and there, a bit of cramping after lunch. I figured it was stress, or maybe I'd developed some weird intolerance to dairy or gluten or whatever people suddenly become allergic to in their 30s. But it kept getting worse. We're talking doubled over in the bathroom, cold sweats, violent nausea that would knock me out for hours. I went to 3 different doctors. They ran every test imaginable: blood work, endoscopy, food sensitivity panels, the works. Everything came back normal. One doctor suggested it might be psychosomatic, which honestly just made me feel insane. Here's the thing though, and this is what finally made me suspicious. It only happened on days I ate lunch at the office. If I skipped lunch or ate out or brought something and forgot to eat it, I was completely fine. But the moment I ate my meal prepped lunch from the break room fridge, within an hour I'd be wrecked. At first I thought maybe the fridge wasn't cold enough and my food was spoiling, but I started checking temperatures, using ice packs, even buying a separate thermometer. Everything was fine. The food was stored properly. There was no logical reason I should be getting sick. That's when I started noticing Sarah. Sarah was one of the other associates competing for partner. She was ambitious in that specific way that makes your skin crawl, you know? Always volunteering for the worst projects, always staying later than everyone else, always making sure the partners saw her doing it. But lately, she'd been weirdly interested in my lunch routine. She'd comment on my Tupperware choices like we were on some home organization show. "Oh, I love those containers. Where'd you get them? Wow, that pasta looks amazing. What's your recipe? You're so disciplined with your meal prep. I wish I had your commitment." At first, I thought she was just being friendly, maybe trying to bond since we were technically rivals. But the enthusiasm felt off, too performative, too interested in things that genuinely did not matter. I mentioned it to my partner one night and they told me I was being paranoid. Maybe I was. The stress of the partnership race was getting to everyone. Another associate had already dropped out after having a breakdown in a partner meeting. The pressure was unreal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. So I did something that probably sounds completely unhinged. I left my phone recording in the break room fridge. I set it up behind some yogurt containers with the camera facing my lunch, turned on the voice recorder app, and just left it there one morning. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that I'd come back at lunch, watch nothing happen, and feel like an idiot. I almost didn't even check the recording, but when I got home that night and finally scrubbed through the footage, my entire world tilted sideways. There was Sarah, clear as day. She walked into the break room, looked around to make sure no one was watching, opened the fridge and pulled out my container of pasta. Then she took a syringe out of her blazer pocket. An actual syringe. She injected something into my food, stirred it around with a fork to distribute whatever it was, and put the container back exactly how she found it. The whole thing took maybe 40 seconds. She was calm, efficient, practiced. This wasn't her first time. I sat on my couch staring at my phone screen, feeling like I was going to throw up. And for once, it had nothing to do with poisoned lunch. This woman had been systematically poisoning me for months. Months. Every single mysterious illness, Every doctor's visit, every humiliating moment spent vomiting in the office bathroom, it was all her. She'd been trying to eliminate me as competition by literally making me too sick to work. The audacity is genuinely breathtaking when you think about it. I saved the video to 3 different places, sent it to my personal email, uploaded it to a secure cloud, the works. Then I went straight to HR first thing the next morning. I showed them the footage. I explained the timeline. I gave them my medical records showing months of unexplained illness that coincided perfectly with days I ate at the office. I thought this would be open and shut. Criminal assault, attempted poisoning. She'd be fired immediately, probably arrested. But that wasn't even the worst part. HR called me back in 2 hours later looking grim. Apparently, Sarah had anticipated this possibility because she'd spent the last 3 weeks planting evidence that I was stealing confidential client data. Forged emails from my account, fake USB drive logs. She'd even created a trail suggesting I was planning to jump to a competitor firm and take privileged information with me. She'd built an entire counter-narrative where I was the villain and she was the hero who discovered it. When I came forward with the poisoning video, she immediately claimed I was retaliating because she'd caught me committing corporate espionage. The firm had no choice but to launch a full investigation into both of us. I was put on immediate administrative leave. So was Sarah. My access to the building was revoked. My email was locked. I went from frontrunner for partner to potential criminal defendant in about 6 hours. My lawyer, and yes, I immediately hired a lawyer, told me this happens sometimes, that guilty people will create elaborate false accusations to muddy the waters and make themselves look credible. But knowing that didn't make it any less terrifying. For 2 weeks, I barely slept. I kept thinking about worst-case scenarios. What if they believed her? What if her fake evidence was too convincing? What if I ended up disbarred over completely fabricated crimes while she got away with actual poisoning? This is where patience finally snapped for everyone involved. The firm hired an external forensic IT team to examine everything. And when I say everything, I mean they tore through our digital lives like archaeologists. Every email, every file transfer, every login, every keystroke. And here's what they found. The supposed evidence against me had been created and backdated using Sarah's personal laptop. The metadata didn't lie. She'd forged everything from her home computer and then planted it in the firm's system using her admin credentials. She'd been sloppy about covering her digital tracks because she never expected anyone to look that closely. But it got so much worse for her. Once they started digging into Sarah's activity, they found communications with 2 other associates, the other people competing for partner positions in different departments. She'd been doing this to them too. One had developed mysterious migraines that forced him to take medical leave. Another had severe gastric episodes that tanked her performance reviews. Sarah had been systematically poisoning everyone she viewed as competition, and she'd been doing it for over a year. She had a whole system, different substances, different delivery methods, detailed notes about symptoms and dosages stored in an encrypted folder on her laptop titled Meal Plans. The woman had a literal poisoning journal. The firm immediately terminated her and contacted law enforcement. The police arrested her at her apartment. They found the syringes, the substances, everything. Toxicology reports on my saved lunch containers, which I'd kept frozen as evidence, showed she'd been using ipecac syrup, which induces severe nausea and vomiting. Not enough to kill anyone, but enough to make them consistently, mysteriously ill. She'd calculated the exact amounts that would cause maximum disruption without triggering hospitalization that might reveal poisoning. Sarah was charged with multiple counts of assault, poisoning, fraud, and about 6 other things I can't even remember. She took a plea deal to avoid trial, 5 years in prison, permanent disbarment, a felony record that ensures she'll never practice law again. The firm settled with all her victims, including me, for an undisclosed amount that covered medical expenses, legal fees, and emotional distress. And here's the final twist. The partnership position she'd been literally poisoning people to get. They offered it to me. The partners said my handling of the situation, my documentation, my professionalism under impossible circumstances, proved I had the judgment and integrity they wanted in leadership. I accepted, obviously. I'd earned it 3 times over at that point. If you've made it this far into the chaos, you're as addicted to Reddit drama as I am. Make sure to subscribe and tell me where you're watching from in the comments below, because trust me, the next story makes workplace toxicity look like kindergarten. Sarah tried to appeal her sentence, claiming she'd had a mental breakdown from partnership pressure. The judge wasn't sympathetic. Last I heard, she's still in prison, and when she gets out, she'll be a middle-aged ex-lawyer with no career prospects and a criminal record. Meanwhile, I'm a senior partner at a top firm. I've completely recovered physically, and I meal prep in a locked, insulated bag that never leaves my sight. Sometimes the best revenge is just letting someone's own malice build a prison cell exactly their size. But wait until you hear what happened when someone's marriage revealed a secret so disturbing it broke the internet for 3 days straight. I'd been married to my husband Daniel for 8 years. We met in grad school, built careers together, bought a house in the suburbs, adopted a golden retriever named Benson. It was comfortable, stable, maybe a little boring sometimes, but in that safe way where boring feels like a luxury. We both traveled for work occasionally, but we trusted each other, or at least I thought we did. I never had any reason to suspect anything was off. No mysterious texts, no unexplained absences, no gut feelings that something was wrong. He seemed happy. I seemed happy. We were just living our normal married life. I had a conference in Seattle that was supposed to last 4 days, but the keynote speaker cancelled last minute, and they condensed everything into 2 days instead. I was honestly thrilled. I hate work travel. I hate hotel rooms and airport food and being away from my own bed. So when they released us early, I booked the first flight home, texted Daniel that I'd be back by dinner, and decided to surprise him with takeout from his favorite Thai place. I got home around 6 in the evening. His car was in the driveway, which was normal. The lights were on upstairs, also normal. I grabbed the food, unlocked the front door, and called out that I was home. No answer. I figured maybe he was in the shower or had headphones on. Benson came running to greet me, tail wagging, completely unbothered. Everything seemed fine. I put the food in the kitchen, kicked off my shoes, and headed upstairs to change out of my travel clothes. Our bedroom door was partially open. I pushed it the rest of the way and walked in. And there they were. My husband of 8 years was sitting on the edge of our bed, head tilted back, latched onto a woman's bare breast like he was a newborn infant. The woman, who I immediately recognized as Monica from his office, was cradling his head with one hand and scrolling through her phone with the other. They both looked up at me. Time stopped. Nobody moved. I stood there in the doorway holding my carry-on bag, and they stared at me from the bed, and for a solid 5 seconds, none of us did anything. Then Daniel jumped up like he'd been electrocuted. Monica somehow stayed completely calm. She adjusted her shirt, set down her phone, and smiled at me like I'd just walked in on them watching television. I still couldn't speak. My brain was trying to process what I'd just seen, and failing spectacularly. Daniel started stammering immediately. He was talking so fast the words barely made sense. Something about alternative stress relief therapy, something about lactation counseling, something about how this wasn't what it looked like, which is genuinely one of the most insulting things you can say to someone when it is very obviously exactly what it looks like. Monica stood up and introduced herself. She shook my hand. She actually shook my hand. Then she explained in this unnervingly calm voice that she was a certified intimacy wellness coach and that what I'd witnessed was a perfectly natural bonding technique rooted in attachment theory and primal comfort patterns. She said Daniel had been experiencing workplace stress, and she'd been helping him reconnect with a sense of security and nurturing through guided lactation sessions. I'm not kidding, those were her actual words, guided lactation sessions. I asked if she was producing milk. She said no, that wasn't necessary for the therapeutic benefit. I asked how long this had been going on. Daniel said 3 months. 3 months. I'd been married to this man for 8 years, and for 3 of the last months he'd been sneaking off to breastfeed from a co-worker who called herself a wellness coach. And here's where it gets absurd. Monica handed me a business card. A business card. Like I'd just attended a networking event. It had her name, the title, Intimacy Wellness Coach, and a website that I absolutely refused to visit. She told me that if I had questions about the practice, I was welcome to book a consultation. She said this without a trace of irony. Then she gathered her things, hugged Daniel, told him she'd see him next week, and left. She just walked out of my house like she'd been there for a book club meeting. Daniel tried to explain. He swore it wasn't sexual. He swore it was therapeutic. He said Monica had studied under some famous attachment therapist in California, and that this was a legitimate practice for adults dealing with unresolved childhood needs. He kept using words like healing and vulnerability and sacred space. I told him to stop talking. He kept talking anyway. He said he'd been planning to tell me but wanted to wait until I could understand the therapeutic context. He said he knew it looked bad, but that I was reacting emotionally instead of intellectually. That's when I told him I wanted a divorce. He looked genuinely shocked, like I was being unreasonable. He asked if we could go to couples counseling first. I told him that the man I married wouldn't have needed to breastfeed from a coworker to manage his stress so clearly that man didn't exist anymore and there was nothing left to counsel. Then I went downstairs, grabbed Benson's leash, and left. I stayed at my sister's house that night. I couldn't even look at our bed. I filed for divorce the next week. My lawyer was an older woman who'd been practicing family law for 30 years, and when I explained what happened, she was silent for a full 10 seconds before saying she'd seen a lot in her career, but never that. She asked if I had any proof. I didn't have photos, but I had the business card. I had Daniel's own admission in text messages where he tried to justify it, and I had Monica's website, which was somehow even worse than I'd imagined. It had testimonials, photos of adults in nursing positions with their faces blurred out, a whole section on neonatal regression therapy. I documented everything, printed emails, saved texts. I even found Daniel's credit card statements showing monthly payments to Monica's LLC for services rendered. My lawyer said we had more than enough for a no-contest divorce based on infidelity and emotional abuse. Then came the breaking point for Daniel's entire life. His family found out. I didn't tell them. He did. He apparently thought they'd understand. He called his mom looking for support and explained the whole situation. She hung up on him. His dad called me directly to apologize on behalf of their family and to tell me they supported whatever decision I made. His younger brother posted a vague status on social media about how you never really know people, and their extended family figured it out from there. Within a week, Daniel was essentially disowned. His mom told him not to come to Christmas. His sister blocked him on everything. They'd all apparently decided that whatever this was crossed a line they couldn't rationalize. Daniel spiraled. He showed up at mediation looking like he hadn't slept in days. His lawyer tried to argue for a 50-50 asset split. My lawyer calmly presented the evidence, including screenshots of Monica's website, where she advertised adult nursing relationships as a specialty service. Daniel's lawyer looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. That's when Daniel tried a new strategy. He claimed I was kink-shaming him. He said that adult nursing was a legitimate relationship dynamic, that consenting adults could engage in whatever practices they wanted, and that I was discriminating against him for his personal choices. His lawyer did not seem enthusiastic about this argument. My lawyer pointed out that engaging in an intimate physical relationship with another woman, regardless of what you called it, was still infidelity. The mediator agreed. The judge wasn't sympathetic either. I got the house, I got full custody of Benson, which Daniel tried to fight until the judge pointed out that a man who couldn't demonstrate basic judgment probably shouldn't be trusted with pet care. And here's my favorite part. Daniel has to pay my therapy bills indefinitely. Not a set amount, not for a set time period. Indefinitely. Because the judge agreed that walking in on your husband breastfeeding from his coworker would require ongoing psychological treatment. And since Daniel caused the trauma, he could fund the recovery. Daniel tried to appeal. He lost. He moved to a different city for a fresh start. Last I heard, Monica's business got reported to some kind of state licensing board, and she had to shut down her website. Turns out you can't just call yourself a certified intimacy wellness coach without actual accreditation, and what she was doing wasn't legally defensible as therapy. I'm doing better now. Therapy actually helped, ironically. Benson is thriving. The house feels like mine again after I redecorated and burned the mattress. And every time Daniel's monthly payment for my therapy sessions processes, I sleep a little better knowing that at least someone's holding him accountable for his choices. You almost have to admire the sheer confidence it takes to think you can explain your way out of that situation. And speaking of therapy bills, this next person's family drama required an entire psychiatric team to unpack. I bought one of those DNA ancestry kits on Black Friday, because they were like $30 and I was bored. You know the ones. They promise to tell you you're 3% Scandinavian or that you're descended from Genghis Khan or whatever. I thought maybe I'd find out I had some distant European royalty in my bloodline, something fun to bring up at dinner parties. I spit in the tube, mailed it off, and honestly forgot about it for like 2 months. When the results came back, I logged in expecting pie charts about my ethnic background. Instead, the first thing I saw was a notification that I had a DNA match, a close relative, specifically a half-sibling, which was weird because I'm an only child. I've always been an only child. My parents tried for years to have another kid after me, and it never happened. My mom had multiple miscarriages, and eventually they just stopped trying. It was a sad chapter in our family history that we didn't talk about much. So seeing half-sibling on my screen made exactly 0 sense. I clicked on the match. His name was Marcus. He was 31, which made him 3 years older than me. His profile said he lived 2 towns over. 2 towns. This wasn't some long-lost relative from another country or a secret adoption situation from generations ago. This was someone who grew up in the same area as me, someone who existed in my immediate orbit my entire life, and I'd never known about him. I stared at his profile picture for way too long. He had my nose, like exactly my nose. Same shape, same slight crook where it looked like maybe it had been broken once but hadn't. I have that crook too. Never broke my nose, just always had it. Looking at his face was like looking at a masculine version of my own features, and it made my skin crawl. I sent him a message. Just something simple asking if he knew anything about our connection. He responded within an hour. He said he'd been on the site hoping to find biological family because he was adopted as a baby and his adoptive parents only knew that his birth mother was a college student who couldn't keep him. He'd been searching for years. He asked if I knew anything about his birth mother. I told him my mum's name. I don't know why. Maybe I was hoping he'd say it didn't match, that this was all some computer error. Instead, he went silent for 2 days. When he finally responded, he said his adoption papers listed that exact name. He sent me a photo of the document with her signature at the bottom. That's when everything unraveled. I couldn't breathe. I sat at my kitchen table staring at my mum's handwriting from 31 years ago on a legal document that signed away parental rights to a baby I'd never heard of. A baby who was apparently my half-brother, which meant my mom had gotten pregnant, given the baby up for adoption, and never told anyone, or at least never told me. And if Marcus was my half-brother, that meant we shared one parent, which meant either my dad wasn't my dad, or my dad wasn't Marcus's dad. I did the math. Marcus was born 3 years before me. My parents got married 2 years before I was born, which meant my mom was pregnant with Marcus before she even met my dad. Except that didn't make sense either because my parents have this whole romantic story about meeting in college and being together ever since. They were high school sweethearts technically, met senior year, went to the same university, got married right after graduation. Unless that story was a lie. I confronted my mom on a Tuesday afternoon, just showed up at her house while my dad was at work, and put Marcus's adoption papers on the kitchen counter. I didn't even say anything at first, just waited for her to see them. She looked confused, then picked them up, then went completely pale. She sat down hard in one of the kitchen chairs and stared at the paper like it was written in a language she couldn't understand. Then she started crying. Not like gentle tears, full body sobbing, the kind of crying where you can't catch your breath. I stood there feeling like the worst person alive, but also furious because she was the one who'd lied for 28 years, and I was the one discovering it through a Black Friday discount DNA kit. When she finally calmed down enough to speak, the whole story came out. She'd had an affair with one of her college professors her sophomore year. He was married, she was 19. It went on for months before she got pregnant. When she told him, he gave her money for an abortion and told her to never contact him again. She couldn't go through with the abortion, but also couldn't keep the baby. Her parents were strict, religious, would have disowned her. So she hid the pregnancy, told everyone she was taking a semester abroad, and gave birth in a different state. She put the baby up for adoption and came back to school like nothing happened. She met my dad, her actual husband, a year later. They fell in love. She never told him. She said she was so ashamed, so scared he'd leave her if he knew. So she just buried it and pretended that version of herself never existed. Then they got married and had me, and built this whole life, and the secret just got bigger and harder to tell, until it felt impossible. I asked her who the father was. She said his name, but I didn't recognize it. She said he still taught at the same university, was a tenured professor now, probably still married to the same wife. She'd seen his name in alumni newsletters over the years, but never reached out, never told him he had a son. Then I asked the question I was terrified to hear the answer to. I asked if my dad was actually my biological father, or if she'd been with the professor when she got pregnant with me too. She swore my dad was my father, said the affair was long over by the time she met him, said I was definitely his. But how could I believe her? How could I trust anything she said when she'd hidden an entire human being for 3 decades? But that wasn't even the worst part. I had to decide whether to tell my dad. My mom begged me not to. She said it would destroy him, destroy their marriage, destroy everything they'd built. She said some secrets were meant to stay buried, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't look at my dad every Sunday dinner and know I was helping her lie to him. He deserved to know. He deserved the truth even if it shattered him. So I told him, privately. We went for a walk in the park near their house and I explained everything. The DNA test, Marcus, the affair, the adoption, all of it. He didn't say anything for a long time. We just walked in silence while he processed. Then he sat down on a bench and cried, just openly wept in the middle of a public park. I sat next to him and cried too because I'd just blown up my family and there was no taking it back. He asked if I was sure I was his. I told him what Mum said but offered to take another DNA test to confirm. He said no. He said it didn't matter, that I was his daughter regardless of what any test said, that he'd raised me, that biology was just biology, but being a parent was about showing up. He said that over and over like he was trying to convince himself, I'm still your dad, you're still my daughter. Nothing changes that. But everything else changed. My parents are divorcing now. My dad moved out 2 months ago. He's not angry exactly, more just devastated, betrayed. He said he could have forgiven a lot of things, but not 30 years of lying, not finding out from his daughter instead of his wife, not building an entire marriage on a foundation that turned out to be fiction. My mum is a wreck. She keeps calling me crying, saying she never meant for any of this to happen, that she thought she was protecting everyone. Marcus and I have been talking. He's actually great. Funny, kind, works as a high school teacher. His adoptive parents are lovely people who supported him through the whole search. He doesn't blame our mum for giving him up. Says he had a good life and understands she was young and scared. He's more well-adjusted about this than anyone else involved. My biological father, the professor, somehow found out through the grapevine and reached out. Sent this long email about wanting to build a relationship, about regret and mistakes and second chances. I read it once and blocked his email address. I don't owe him anything. He gave my mum money to erase his problem and walked away. Marcus might be generous enough to forgive that. I'm not. The thing nobody tells you about DNA tests is that sometimes you're better off not knowing. My dad is still my dad. That part didn't change, but my family is permanently fractured, and I'm the one who cracked it open. Some days I wish I'd never bought that stupid kit. Other days I'm glad I know the truth because at least now we're not living a lie. My dad still calls me every week. Takes me to lunch, asks about work. He made it very clear that our relationship doesn't change, that he chose me the day I was born and he's still choosing me now. That's more than biology ever gave anyone. DNA bombshells are one thing, but imagine discovering your entire childhood was a crime scene. I took an ancestry test last year because my girlfriend was really into genealogy and convinced me it would be fun. I didn't think much of it. I expected to find out I was some mix of European ancestry, maybe connect with a distant cousin or two, nothing major. My parents had always been vague about our family history. They said most of their relatives had passed away, or they'd lost touch over the years. I never questioned it. Lots of families drift apart. The results came back and showed the usual ethnic breakdown. 60% this, 20% that, some trace amounts of other things. But then I saw the DNA relatives section. There was a match labeled as a close family member, parent or child level closeness. Her name was Jennifer. I clicked on her profile and saw she'd been actively searching for family connections for years. Her profile description said she was looking for her daughter, who went missing in 1996. 1996, the year I was born. I stared at that sentence for a long time. Her missing daughter would be my exact age. I told myself it was a coincidence. DNA tests make mistakes. Maybe the algorithm glitched, but something in my stomach felt wrong. I sent her a message anyway, just said I'd matched with her as a close relative and was confused because I didn't know of any family members searching for lost relatives. She responded within an hour, asked for my birthday. I told her, April 14th, 1996. She went silent for a day. When she replied, she asked if I'd be willing to share a photo. I sent her a recent picture. She sent back a message that just said, "Oh my God," followed by a dozen photos of a baby girl in a hospital nursery, a baby with a specific birthmark on her left shoulder blade, the same birthmark I have, the same birthmark I've had my entire life. I felt like the ground opened up underneath me. Jennifer explained that her daughter was taken from a hospital in Pennsylvania 27 years ago. She'd given birth, held her baby for a few hours, then a nurse took the baby for routine tests. The baby never came back. The hospital went into lockdown. Police investigated. They found nothing. No surveillance footage that helped, no witnesses, no leads. Her daughter just vanished. She'd been searching ever since, put her DNA in every database available, never stopped hoping. I asked her to send more photos. She sent pictures of herself, her family, the missing person posters from 1996. And the thing is, I look like her. Not exactly, but enough. Same nose, same chin, same eyes. I looked like I could be her daughter. My hands were shaking. I didn't know what to do with this information. Part of me wanted to delete everything and pretend I'd never seen it, but I couldn't. I kept thinking about my parents, the people who raised me. They'd always been strange about certain things. We never went to hospitals. I was homeschooled. We moved every few years to different states. They said it was for my dad's work, but he did freelance IT consulting from home. There was no reason to move that much, and I'd never seen my birth certificate. Anytime I needed it for something, my mum would handle it. She'd send in paperwork, deal with the bureaucracy. When I asked to see it once for a passport application, she said it was in a safe deposit box, and she'd take care of it. I got my passport eventually, so I didn't push. But now I was thinking about all those weird little things that never quite added up. I didn't have baby photos. My parents said they lost them in a move. I had pictures from maybe age 4 onward, but nothing from when I was a newborn or toddler. My mum said she wasn't good at keeping albums back then. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? And here's where it gets absurd. I decided to confront them. I drove to their house on a Saturday morning with printouts of everything. The ancestry results, Jennifer's messages, the photos of the missing baby with my birthmark. I walked in and put it all on the kitchen table and asked them to explain. My dad looked confused. My mum looked at the papers, looked at me, and her face went completely white. She sat down hard in a chair. My dad picked up the papers, started reading, and I watched the color drain from his face too. Nobody spoke for what felt like an eternity. Then my mom started crying. Not regular crying, hysterical, gasping, can't breathe crying. My dad just stared at the table. I stood there demanding answers, demanding they tell me this was all a mistake, a coincidence, that they could explain everything. My mom finally looked up at me and said, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." We never meant for it to go this far. I felt like I was going to throw up. She told me everything. They'd had a daughter, a biological daughter. My mum gave birth in a hospital in Pennsylvania in April of 1996. The baby was stillborn. They were devastated. My mum had a breakdown. She was incoherent with grief. My dad didn't know what to do. They were in the hospital for hours, numb, destroyed. Then my mum saw a baby in the nursery, a healthy baby girl, and something in her brain snapped. She told my dad they needed to take her, that it was fate, that God was giving them their daughter back. My dad tried to talk her down, but she wouldn't listen. She was manic, frantic. She stole a nurse's badge from a locker room. She walked into the nursery, picked up a baby, the baby that happened to have been born the same day their daughter died, and walked out. My dad followed her. He said he should have stopped her, should have called for help, but he was in shock too. They got to the car. They drove. They kept driving. They didn't plan it. They just ran. They changed their names, paid someone cash for fake documents, moved to a different state, then another state, then another. They homeschooled me so I wouldn't need official records. They avoided hospitals, avoided anything that would require showing a real birth certificate. They built an entire life around hiding what they'd done, and they convinced themselves it was okay, that I was happy, that they were good parents, that the woman they'd stolen me from would move on. My mum said she told herself the story so many times she almost believed it. That I was meant to be theirs, that taking me wasn't a crime, it was destiny. I couldn't process it. These people, the only parents I'd ever known, had kidnapped me, had stolen me from a hospital, had ruined another woman's life and then just lived normally for 27 years like it was fine. I left the house. I didn't say anything else. I just grabbed the papers and left. I sat in my car and called the police. Told them everything. They dispatched officers immediately. I gave them Jennifer's contact information. I gave them my ancestry results. I told them where my parents lived. Then came the breaking point for everyone involved. The FBI got involved because it was a decades-old kidnapping case. They arrested my parents that same day. My mum collapsed when they put the handcuffs on. My dad didn't resist. He just looked empty. Hollow. They were charged with kidnapping, falsifying documents, identity fraud, probably a dozen other things. Jennifer flew out to meet me 2 days later. We met at a coffee shop. I saw her walk in and I knew immediately. She looked like an older version of what I might look like in 20 years. She cried when she saw me. I cried too. We sat there for an hour just talking, trying to piece together what came next. She told me about my biological father who died 5 years ago, never knowing what happened to his daughter. She told me about my half-siblings, 2 brothers I'd never met. She showed me photos of the life I should have had. Birthday parties I wasn't at. Holidays I missed. An entire family that had a hole in it shaped like me. I didn't know how to feel. Still don't really. I'm angry at my parents. Furious. But I also loved them. They raised me. They weren't abusive. They were kind, supportive, involved. They taught me to read, helped me with homework, drove me to soccer practice. They were good parents except for the part where they built our entire relationship on a kidnapping. My mum took a plea deal. 15 years, my dad got 12. They'll be old when they get out. They both wrote me letters from jail. I haven't opened them. I don't know if I ever will. Jennifer and I are building a relationship. It's slow, awkward. She wants to make up for lost time, but I'm not the daughter she lost. I'm someone else. Someone raised by the people who took me. I'm in therapy twice a week trying to figure out who I actually am, trying to reconcile the life I thought I had with the reality of what happened. I met my half-brothers last month. They're great. Weird to have siblings suddenly. They don't blame me for anything. They're just glad I'm alive, glad their mum finally has an answer after 27 years. But I'm not whole. I don't know if I'll ever be. The people I loved most in the world were criminals who stole my entire identity, and now I'm supposed to just move forward and build a relationship with strangers who are technically my real family. There's no manual for this, no guidebook for how to process that your entire childhood was a lie built on someone else's trauma. I changed my name legally, took Jennifer's last name. It felt like the right thing to do, but I still think of myself by the name my kidnapped parents gave me. That's the name I've had for 27 years. That's who I am in my head. People ask if I've forgiven them. I don't know how to answer that. Forgiveness feels impossible, but so does completely hating them. They're just people who made an unforgivable choice in a moment of grief and then spent almost 3 decades running from it. Identity theft is traumatic, but what happens when the person stealing from you is supposed to be your safety net? My grandparents died when I was 15. They were incredible people who believed in education above everything else. My grandfather was a self-made guy who built a successful construction company from nothing, and my grandmother was a teacher for 40 years. They didn't have a ton of money, but they were comfortable. And they loved me. I was their only grandchild. When they passed, they left me $180,000 in a trust specifically for college. It was managed by my Aunt Linda, my mum's older sister. She was a paralegal, worked at a law firm, seemed responsible and trustworthy. My parents thought it made sense to have her handle it since she understood legal documents and financial stuff. I was just a teenager. I didn't question it. I was grateful and heartbroken and trying to process losing the 2 people who'd always made me feel like I could do anything. For 3 years, I didn't think much about the money. I knew it was there. My aunt would occasionally mention it, say things like, We're keeping it safe for you, or your grandparents would be so proud. I focused on getting through high school, getting good grades, applying to colleges. I got into a decent state university, not Ivy League or anything, but a solid school with a good program for what I wanted to study. I was excited. I was finally going to use the gift my grandparents left me. I turned 18 in July before my freshman year. I called my aunt and asked about accessing the trust fund. I needed to pay tuition, housing, all the usual stuff. She said she'd send over the paperwork and we'd get it sorted out. A week went by, then 2 weeks. I kept calling. She kept saying she was working on it, that there was some paperwork delay, that the bank was being slow. I started to worry, but I trusted her. She was family. She'd been managing this money for 3 years. Why would she make it difficult now? Finally, she sent me a bank statement. I opened it expecting to see something close to the original amount, maybe a bit more with interest. Instead, the balance was $3,000. 3,000 out of 180,000. I called her immediately, freaking out. There had to be a mistake. She was calm, too calm. She said there was no mistake. She said I'd been withdrawing money from the account for years, that I'd forged documents, taken out cash, blown it on who knows what. She said she'd tried to stop me, but I was legally allowed to make withdrawals as the beneficiary, and she couldn't prevent it. I told her that was insane. I'd never touched the account. I didn't even have access to it. She was the trustee. She managed everything. She said I was lying, that I must have memory problems or was trying to cover my tracks, but the bank records didn't lie. She said she had proof. Then she called my parents, told them the same story, said I'd drained the account and was now trying to blame her to avoid taking responsibility. My parents confronted me. I swore I hadn't touched the money. They wanted to believe me, I think, but my aunt was so convincing. She showed them bank statements with withdrawal records. She showed them signatures that supposedly were mine. She painted this picture of me as a reckless teenager who'd secretly been stealing from my own college fund and was now trying to frame her. And here's where it gets absurd. My entire family believed her. My parents, my cousins, my uncle, everyone. Because my Aunt Linda was the responsible one. She had the good job, the clean record, the reputation for being trustworthy. I was just the kid, the teenager who must have screwed up and was too proud to admit it. Family dinners became interrogations. People would ask me what I'd spent the money on, why I'd betrayed my grandparents' trust, how I could be so selfish. I kept saying I didn't do it. Nobody listened. I was supposed to start college in 3 weeks. I had $3,000. Tuition alone was $15,000 a year. I couldn't afford to go. I deferred my enrollment and moved into a friend's basement because living at home had become unbearable. My parents weren't kicking me out exactly, but the disappointment and suspicion made every interaction painful. I was furious and desperate and broke. I took the last bit of money I had, about $1,200 I'd saved from working retail, and hired a forensic accountant. I found someone who did consulting work and was willing to look at the case for a flat fee. I gave him everything: the trust documents, the bank statements my aunt had provided, my own records showing I'd never had access to the account. He dug in. It took him 3 weeks. What he found was so much worse than I'd imagined. My aunt had been systematically draining the account from the moment she became trustee. She'd set up a separate business account under a shell company name, created fake invoices for trust management fees, and transferred money in increments that wouldn't trigger automatic fraud alerts. She'd moved over $160,000 over 3 years. The remaining $20,000 she'd withdrawn as cash, using a forged authorization that supposedly had my signature on it. But the forensic accountant proved the signature was traced from my driver's license application and didn't match my actual signing patterns. But that wasn't even the worst part. He traced where the money went. My aunt's boyfriend at the time was big into cryptocurrency. This was back when everyone thought they were going to get rich off Bitcoin and Ethereum and whatever other coins were trendy. He'd convinced my aunt to invest in his trading scheme. She'd funneled my entire college fund into his crypto venture, and he'd lost almost all of it. Bad trades, bad timing, bad everything. By the time I tried to access the trust, the money was just gone, evaporated into the digital void. The forensic accountant compiled everything into a report with bank records, blockchain transaction records, email evidence, everything. I took it to a lawyer. The lawyer looked it over and said this was textbook embezzlement and fraud. We filed a lawsuit. We also filed a report with the police. My aunt hired her own lawyer and doubled down on her story. Said I was fabricating evidence, that I'd somehow hacked records or paid someone to create fake documents. Her lawyer argued that the forensic accountant was biased because I'd paid him. It was desperate and transparent, but she committed to it fully. The case took 8 months to get to trial. During that time, my family still mostly believed her. A few people started having doubts as more evidence came out, but my aunt was convincing. She cried in front of everyone. She played the victim. She said I was destroying the family over my own mistakes. Then came the breaking point for her entire defense. During discovery, her boyfriend was subpoenaed. He panicked and flipped immediately, gave up everything, testified that my aunt had told him the money was hers to invest, that she'd said it was an inheritance she'd received. He had text messages, voicemails, everything. He threw her completely under the bus to save himself from being charged as an accessory. The jury took 2 hours to deliberate, found in my favor on every count. The judge awarded me $187,000, the original amount plus interest and legal fees. My aunt's lawyer immediately filed an appeal. It was denied. Then my aunt filed for bankruptcy, just straight up filed for bankruptcy to avoid paying me. She claimed she had no assets, no savings, nothing. And maybe that was true. Maybe she really had lost everything in crypto and had nothing left. But it felt like a final act of spite, a way to make sure that even though she'd lost, I still wouldn't get what I was owed. The bankruptcy meant I'd never see most of that money. I got about $20,000 from the settlement after her assets were liquidated. Not nothing, but nowhere near what my grandparents left me. Nowhere near what I'd need for 4 years of university. My family finally apologized. My mum cried and said she should have believed me. My dad said he was ashamed he'd doubted me. Cousins and aunts and uncles reached out saying they were sorry, that they should have known Linda was lying. And maybe they meant it. Maybe they really felt bad. But it was too late. They'd chosen to believe I was a thief instead of considering that their beloved, responsible Linda could be the problem. They'd made me feel crazy and alone during the worst period of my life. Sorry didn't fix that. I told them all I didn't want a relationship anymore. Blocked numbers, skipped holidays, just cut ties completely. Some people called that harsh. I called it self-preservation. I couldn't be around people who'd so easily assumed the worst about me and so easily believed someone who'd spent years stealing from a kid. I enrolled in community college, worked 3 jobs, morning shift at a coffee shop, afternoons doing data entry remotely, evenings at a restaurant. I lived in a tiny studio apartment with 2 roommates. I bought textbooks used or pirated PDFs when I had to. I graduated last month with my associate's degree, completely debt-free. It took me longer than 4 years and I'm exhausted, but I did it myself. Nobody can take that from me. I'm transferring to a 4-year school in the fall. I got some scholarships and financial aid. I'll keep working. It won't be easy, but I've gotten pretty good at not easy. And my Aunt Linda, last I heard she's still bankrupt, still unemployed. And her boyfriend left her the moment the court case ended. She tried reaching out to apologize last year. I didn't respond. Some bridges you burn because they were already rotted through, and keeping them around was dangerous. Financial betrayal is devastating, but when your career becomes a crime scene, survival takes on a whole new meaning. I was the finance director at a mid-sized tech company called Apex Innovations. We did software solutions for healthcare systems, boring enterprise stuff that nobody outside the industry cared about. I'd been there for 6 years, worked my way up from senior accountant to director. Good salary, decent benefits, respected by my team. I thought I had a stable career doing honest work. Then I started noticing discrepancies in our quarterly earnings reports. It was small stuff at first. Revenue numbers that didn't quite match what I was seeing in our internal systems. Expenses that seemed lower than they should be. I figured it was rounding errors or maybe different accounting methods between departments. But the gaps kept getting bigger. By the 3rd quarter, we were reporting revenue that was about 15% higher than what our actual sales data showed. I brought it up with our CFO, a guy named Richard Brennan. He'd been with the company for 12 years, was tight with the CEO and the board, basically untouchable. I asked him about the discrepancies in a casual way, like I was just trying to understand the accounting better. He got defensive immediately, told me the numbers were fine, that I was looking at incomplete data, that the board had already approved everything. He said if I had concerns, I should trust the process instead of questioning people above my pay grade. That response made my stomach drop, because if the numbers were legitimate, he would have just explained them. The fact that he got hostile meant he was hiding something. I started digging quietly, pulled old reports, cross-referenced sales data, looked at investor presentations. What I found was systematic fraud. Richard had been inflating our earnings for at least 2 years, maybe longer. He was booking revenue from contracts that hadn't closed yet, hiding expenses in subsidiary accounts, basically cooking the books to make the company look more profitable than it actually was, and he was doing it to attract investors. We were in the middle of a Series C funding round. Investors were basing their decisions on fraudulent numbers. I knew I had to report it, but I also knew that going directly to Richard again would be suicide. So I went to the board, anonymously. I compiled all the evidence, wrote a detailed report, and submitted it through the company's anonymous ethics hotline. I explained everything, showed the real numbers versus the reported numbers, highlighted specific examples of fraudulent entries. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was protected. I was so incredibly wrong. A week later, federal agents showed up at my house at 6 in the morning. They had a warrant for my arrest. I was being charged with embezzling $2 million from Apex Innovations. I stood there in my pajamas while they read me my rights and genuinely thought there had been some kind of mistake. I tried explaining that I was the one who'd reported fraud, that I was trying to help, that this made no sense. They told me to save it for my lawyer. They took me to the FBI field office, showed me evidence, bank statements showing regular transfers from Apex accounts into an offshore account in my name, forged authorization forms with my signature approving the transfers, email chains where I supposedly discussed the embezzlement with an accomplice. Everything pointed to me. It was meticulous and thorough and completely fabricated. And here's where it gets absurd. Richard had framed me. The moment I submitted that anonymous ethics report, he must have known it was me. I was the only person in finance with enough access to see the full picture. So he'd spent the week building a case against me. He'd created fake bank accounts, backdated documents, forged my signature on authorization forms. He'd made it look like I'd been stealing from the company for months, and that my ethics report was actually an attempt to frame him before I got caught. It was brilliant in the most evil way possible. He'd turned my whistleblowing into evidence of my guilt. I posted bail using my savings, hired the best criminal defense lawyer I could afford, which immediately wiped out another chunk of my money. My lawyer looked at the evidence and his face went pale. He said it looked bad, really bad. The forged documents were convincing. The bank records seemed legitimate. If we couldn't prove I'd been set up, I was looking at serious prison time. I was suspended from work immediately. My colleagues avoided me. My boss, who I'd worked with for years, wouldn't return my calls. The company released a statement about my arrest. Said they were shocked and disappointed, that they were cooperating fully with law enforcement, that this betrayal of trust was unacceptable. They painted me as a criminal who'd stolen from the company while pretending to be a loyal employee. My life fell apart in slow motion. My girlfriend left me, said she couldn't be with someone facing federal charges, that she didn't know who I really was anymore. Friends stopped calling. My parents believed me, but they were terrified and had no idea how to help. I was burning through my savings on legal fees and couldn't work because I was suspended, and also because who wants to hire someone under investigation for embezzlement? I spent every night going through old work files I'd saved on my personal laptop, searching for anything that could prove my innocence. Old emails, old reports, anything. I was desperate and running out of money and facing the possibility of spending a decade in prison for a crime I didn't commit. Then I found something. One of our servers had an automated backup system that saved logs of every document edit, every email sent, every file accessed. I'd set it up years ago for disaster recovery purposes. The company knew about it, but nobody ever looked at the logs because they were technical and boring. I still had admin access to the backup server from home. I started combing through the logs, looking at timestamps, user IDs, document creation dates, and I found it. The emails that supposedly showed me planning the embezzlement had been created a week ago, not months ago like the timestamps claimed. Richard had backdated them, but the server logs showed the real creation dates. Same with the authorization forms. They'd been created and uploaded to the system after my ethics report was submitted. I had proof he'd fabricated everything. I compiled the server logs, matched them with the forged documents, created a timeline showing exactly when Richard had created the false evidence. I handed everything to my lawyer. He handed it to the FBI. They took it seriously because server logs are hard to fake, and mine were detailed and consistent. What happened next? Nobody saw it coming. The FBI launched a parallel investigation into Richard. They got a warrant for his computer and the company servers. They found his original files before he'd backdated them. They found communications with a tech contractor he'd paid to help create the offshore accounts. They found everything. Then they raided Apex Innovations at dawn. Walked in with a dozen agents and seized servers, files, computers. Richard was arrested at his desk. The CEO was brought in for questioning. The whole company went into chaos. Trading on our stock was halted. Investors panicked. It was a disaster. The charges against me were dropped immediately. The FBI issued a statement saying I'd been wrongfully accused and that new evidence had exonerated me completely. My lawyer held a press conference, said I was the victim of retaliation for trying to expose corporate fraud, said I deserved an apology and compensation. Richard took a plea deal, 15 years in federal prison. He admitted to the earnings fraud, the embezzlement frame job, everything. The company settled with defrauded investors. The CEO resigned, the board was replaced. Apex Innovations basically imploded. I got my reputation back, technically. The charges were gone. The news covered my exoneration. People who'd abandoned me reached out to apologize. My ex-girlfriend sent a text saying she'd made a mistake. I didn't respond. But my career was over. No company wants to hire the whistleblower. Even though I'd been proven right, even though I'd exposed actual fraud, I was now the guy who brought down a company. I applied to dozens of finance positions, got interviews, made it to final rounds, and then they'd ghost me. Or they'd give some excuse about going in a different direction. One recruiter was honest enough to tell me off the record that companies saw me as a liability, that they were worried I'd report them too if I found something wrong. Imagine being punished for doing the right thing, even after you're vindicated. I ended up leaving the industry entirely, started doing freelance consulting from home. It pays okay. I'm not struggling, but it's not the career I built for 6 years. I'm not respected the way I was. I'm just a guy who works alone and tries not to think about how exposing the truth cost me everything. Richard's in prison, the company's gone, and I'm here, proven innocent but still carrying the consequences of someone else's crimes. That's how whistleblowing works in the real world. You can be completely right and still lose everything. Career destruction is brutal, but nothing prepares you for when family members start weaponizing major life events. My brother Jake got engaged 2 years ago to a woman named Melissa. She was great, smart, funny, had her life together. Way better than Jake deserved, honestly. But I kept that opinion to myself. They seemed happy. They planned this big wedding, invited 200 people, rented out a vineyard venue, the whole production. I was supposed to be a groomsman. Our parents were thrilled. Finally, Jake was settling down and acting like an adult. Melissa handled most of the wedding planning because Jake is fundamentally lazy about anything that requires organization. She picked the venue, the caterer, the florist, all of it. A few months before the wedding, she found a photographer on Instagram. The portfolio was incredible. Gorgeous, candid shots, perfect lighting, artistic compositions, and the price was suspiciously cheap, like half what other photographers were quoting. Melissa was excited. She showed Jake and he barely looked, said it was fine, said whatever she wanted was good with him. The photographer's name was Eleanor, or at least that's what her business page said. Eleanor Rose Photography. Very professional looking website, great reviews, everything seemed legitimate. Melissa booked her immediately. I met Elena the day of the wedding. She showed up early to do getting ready shots. She was polite, professional, knew exactly what she was doing. Mid-30s maybe, dark hair, kind of quiet. She moved around the venue setting up equipment and taking test shots. Nothing seemed off. She was just doing her job. The ceremony went fine. Beautiful day. No one objected when the officiant did that whole speak now or forever, hold your peace thing. Jake and Melissa exchanged vows and kissed and everyone clapped. We moved to the reception. Dinner was served, speeches happened. My dad cried during his toast like we all knew he would. Everything was exactly how a wedding is supposed to go. Then came time for the photo slideshow. Most wedding photographers put together a same-day edit, a quick slideshow of highlights from the ceremony and portraits set to music. It plays during the reception while people are eating cake or dancing. Melissa had specifically requested this. She wanted guests to see some of the photos before the night ended. Elena set up a projector and screen. The lights dimmed, music started playing, and the first image that appeared was not from that day's wedding. It was a wedding photo from 10 years ago. My brother Jake in a tuxedo standing next to a woman in a wedding dress. Not Melissa, a different woman. They were cutting a cake together, smiling at the camera. The room went silent. Melissa stood up from the head table looking confused. Jake's face went white. The next photo appeared. Jake and the mystery woman kissing at the altar. Then another. Them dancing. Them with what looked like wedding guests. Then a photo of them holding a newborn baby in a hospital. Melissa screamed, not like a startled yelp, a full guttural scream of rage and confusion. She turned to Jake and yelled, "What is this?" He was stammering, trying to form words. Guests were muttering, looking around, nobody understanding what was happening. The slideshow kept going. More photos of Jake with this other woman and a baby who grew into a toddler over the course of the images. Family photos, birthday parties, completely normal domestic life. And then the photos stopped and text appeared on the screen. Jake abandoned us 8 years ago. Drained our joint account and disappeared. Left me with a 2-year-old and no way to pay rent. Never paid child support. Changed his phone number. Pretended we didn't exist. Congratulations on your new marriage to a man who already had a family he threw away. The screen went black. The lights came up. Everyone was staring at Jake. Melissa was crying and yelling. Jake's face was red, and he was looking around frantically like he was trying to figure out an escape route. That's when Elena stepped forward. The photographer. She walked calmly to the front of the room and said, "Hi, Jake. Remember me? I'm your wife. Well, technically your ex-wife now since you never bothered to actually file for divorce, and I had to do it myself 3 years ago. And this is our son." She gestured to a kid, maybe 10 years old, who was standing near the back of the room with an older woman I assumed was Elena's mum. The room exploded. People were shouting questions. Melissa threw her bouquet at Jake and stormed out. Bridesmaids followed her. Jake tried to say something, but Elena cut him off. She said she'd tracked him down through social media 2 years ago, when she finally had enough money saved to hire a lawyer for the child support case. She said she'd watched him build this new life, get engaged, plan a wedding, all while ignoring the family he'd abandoned. So she rebranded herself as a wedding photographer, made a fake portfolio using photos she'd edited from free stock images, and waited for Melissa to find her. And here's where it gets absurd. Elena said she'd deliberately priced herself lower than other photographers to make sure Melissa would book her. She'd been planning this for months. The whole professional photographer thing was just a cover. She'd taken a few online courses to learn enough to seem credible, bought used equipment, built a fake online presence with purchased reviews, all to get access to Jake's wedding and destroy it in the most public way possible. Jake tried to yell at her, called her insane. She laughed, said he'd drained their bank account of $12,000 and disappeared in the middle of the night 8 years ago. Said she'd struggled for years as a single mum, working multiple jobs while he started over in another state and pretended he had no responsibilities. Said insane was abandoning your toddler son. Our parents were mortified. My mum was crying. My dad looked like he wanted to crawl into a hole. I honestly had no idea Jake had been married before. He'd never mentioned it. None of us knew. Apparently he'd gotten married young, had a kid, panicked about the responsibility, and just ran. Literally emptied their savings and moved across the state and started fresh. Guests started leaving. The venue staff looked uncomfortable. The caterers were still trying to serve cake to a room that had descended into complete chaos. Melissa came back in briefly, told Jake she never wanted to see him again, and left with her parents. The wedding was over. Jake tried to threaten Elena, said he'd sue her for fraud, for emotional distress, for ruining his wedding. She said go ahead. She hadn't broken any laws. She'd been hired to photograph a wedding, and she'd photographed a wedding, just not the one happening that day. Her contract didn't specify which wedding she'd feature in the slideshow, and she'd provided exactly the service she'd been paid for. Documentation of Jake's marriages. Plural. Things went from bad to unhinged after that. Jake tried to get a lawyer. The lawyer told him he had no case. Elena had been deceptive, sure, but not illegal. And if he pushed it, she'd countersue for 8 years of unpaid child support plus interest. Jake shut up real quick after that. The state caught up with him, though. Elena had already filed through the proper channels. They tracked his employment, garnished his wages, hit him with a bill for back child support that was something like $70,000. He had to set up a payment plan. He's been paying it off for 2 years now and will be for at least 3 more. Melissa obviously called off the wedding. She moved out of their apartment and blocked him on everything. Last I heard, she's engaged to someone else now and doing great. Jake moved back in with our parents because he couldn't afford rent after child support garnishment. He works a job he hates and comes home to our childhood bedroom every night. Our family relationship with him is pretty strained. My parents are disappointed but trying to be supportive. I mostly avoid him. The fact that he had a whole wife and kid he abandoned and never told anyone is the kind of thing that changes how you see someone. You can't really come back from that. Elena and her son are apparently doing well. I found her actual social media, not the fake photography business one. She's got a good job now, the kids thriving, they seem happy. She never actually wanted to be a wedding photographer. The whole thing was just an elaborate setup to make sure Jake's lies caught up with him in the most devastating way possible. You've got to respect the commitment to long-term revenge planning. Jake tried reaching out to his son a few times. The kid wants nothing to do with him. Can't blame him. Hard to build a relationship with a dad who abandoned you as a toddler and only came back because the state forced him to pay child support. The vineyard venue kept the deposit, obviously. Melissa's parents demanded a refund from all the vendors they'd paid. Some refunded, some didn't. It was a legal mess. Melissa ended up losing money on a wedding that imploded before the first dance. And Jake, he's exactly where he belongs. Paying for his mistakes literally and figuratively. Living in his childhood bedroom at 37. Watching his ex-fiancée move on. Sending monthly payments to the family he tried to erase. Karma works in mysterious ways, but sometimes it works with surgical precision. Revenge is messy, but when you mix workplace ambition with actual assault, things get downright criminal. I was working a double shift at a regional logistics company called Consolidated Transport. I'd been there for 4 years, worked my way up from warehouse associate to shift supervisor. It was one of those jobs that wasn't glamorous but paid okay and had decent benefits. My boss, regional manager named Tom Hendricks, was the kind of guy who treated employees like expendable resources. High turnover, constant pressure, never a word of appreciation. But I needed the job, so I kept my head down and did the work. That particular day, I'd picked up a double because we were short-staffed, and Tom had pressured me into staying, said it showed commitment, said he'd remember it come review time. I'd been there since 6 in the morning, and it was pushing 8 at night. I was exhausted, counting down the hours until I could leave. I was in the stock room doing inventory when I heard a crash. Went to check it out and found Tom collapsed on the concrete floor. At first I thought maybe he'd tripped, but he wasn't moving. Wasn't responding when I called his name. I got closer and realized he wasn't breathing right. His face was grey, his lips were turning blue. I'd taken a CPR certification course years ago for a different job, and somehow my brain just switched into that mode. I checked for a pulse. It was there but weak and irregular. I tilted his head back, checked his airway, and started chest compressions. Called 911 on speaker while I worked. The dispatcher talked me through it. Told me to keep going, that paramedics were on the way. 9 minutes, that's how long I did CPR. 9 minutes of pushing down on his chest rhythmically, trying to keep blood flowing to his brain, watching his face stay that awful grey colour. My arms were shaking. I was terrified he was going to die right there. Other employees had gathered around, but nobody knew what to do. They just watched while I tried to keep my boss alive. Paramedics finally arrived. They took over, got him stabilized, loaded him onto a gurney. One of them told me I'd probably saved his life. That if I hadn't started CPR immediately, he likely would have died before they got there. I felt this weird mix of relief and exhaustion and adrenaline. My hands were trembling. They were loading Tom into the ambulance when one of the paramedics asked if anyone was riding with him. Nobody volunteered. Everyone just kind of looked around. So I said I would. I climbed into the ambulance, sat on the little side bench while they worked on him, and we headed to the hospital. That's when my phone buzzed. email notification from HR. I almost ignored it, but something made me check. The subject line said, Notice of Termination. I opened it thinking maybe it was spam or sent to me by mistake. It wasn't. It was a formal termination letter, addressed to me, effective immediately, cited performance issues, failure to meet expectations, violation of company policies I'd apparently broken but weren't specified. My access to company systems had been revoked. My final paycheck would be mailed. I was instructed not to return to the facility and to surrender any company property within 24 hours. I sat there in the ambulance watching paramedics work on the man I'd just spent 9 minutes keeping alive, reading an email that fired me. The timestamp showed it had been scheduled to send at 8:15 p.m. It was now 8:17. This is where patience finally snapped in the most surreal way possible. I didn't say anything to the paramedics. We got to the hospital. They rushed Tom into emergency. A nurse asked for my information since I'd come with him. I gave them what I knew, explained I was his employee, but didn't have any of his personal contacts or medical history. They thanked me and told me I could wait in the lobby if I wanted updates. I sat in that waiting room for 20 minutes trying to process what had just happened. Tom had scheduled my firing email before his heart attack. He'd planned to fire me at the end of my double shift. The shift he'd guilted me into working, and then he'd nearly died and I'd saved him in the email sent anyway, while I was literally riding in an ambulance trying to make sure he survived. The absurdity was almost funny. Almost. I left the hospital, drove back to the warehouse to get my stuff. Security was already there. They'd been notified of my termination and were waiting to escort me out. I wasn't allowed to go to my locker alone. Wasn't allowed to say goodbye to coworkers. They watched while I emptied my locker into a cardboard box, handed over my ID badge and facility keys, and walked me to my car. 4 years of work ended while I was performing CPR on the guy who fired me. I went home, sat on my couch staring at the wall. My phone rang around 11 p.m. Hospital number. A nurse saying Tom was stable, awake, and asking for me. Wanted to thank me personally. I hung up without responding. He called me directly the next morning, left a voicemail, said there had been a terrible mistake, that the termination email was scheduled before his heart attack, and he'd meant to cancel it but obviously hadn't been able to. Said he was grateful for what I'd done. Said he wanted to make it right, that my job was still there, that we could work everything out. I didn't call him back. Instead, I called every news outlet in our city, local TV stations, newspapers, radio shows, told them the story. Guy saves boss's life with CPR, gets fired via auto-scheduled email while riding in the ambulance. Some of them thought I was making it up, but I had the termination email with its timestamp. I had the ambulance dispatch records showing when the call came in. I had witnesses who'd seen me doing CPR. The first story ran 2 days later on the local evening news. Then a newspaper picked it up. Then it hit social media. Then it went viral. But that wasn't even the worst part for Tom and his company. The story framed it exactly as it was. Company fires dedicated employee of 4 years via scheduled email while he's literally saving the boss's life. People were outraged. The company's social media got flooded with negative comments. Their Google reviews tanked overnight. Employees started coming forward with their own stories of how poorly they'd been treated. Then the clients started pulling out. Consolidated Transport relied on contracts with mid-sized businesses for shipping and logistics. Those businesses started cancelling, said they didn't want to be associated with a company that treated employees that way. 3 major contracts terminated within a week. The company lost something like 40% of its revenue. Tom called me repeatedly, left voicemails begging me to make a statement, to tell the media it was a misunderstanding to help calm things down. His voicemails got increasingly desperate. He offered my job back with a raise, then a significant raise, then a promotion. I never responded. What happened next? Nobody saw it coming, least of all Tom. Competitors reached out to me. 3 different logistics companies in the region offered me jobs. All of them came with salaries that were double what I'd been making at Consolidated. One offered me a management position. They said anyone who had the composure to perform CPR for 9 minutes and save someone's life was exactly the kind of person they wanted leading their teams. I took the best offer. Management role, great benefits, salary that actually let me save money for the first time in years. Started 2 weeks after the termination. Consolidated Transport ended up downsizing significantly. They lost so many contracts they had to lay off about half their staff. Tom kept his job somehow, but the company's reputation was destroyed. Last I checked, their Glassdoor reviews are still abysmal, and they're struggling to hire anyone because everyone knows the story. Tom sent me a final email about 6 months later, long apology about how he'd made a mistake, how he'd let workplace stress cloud his judgment, how firing me had been wrong even before the heart attack, said he hoped I could forgive him someday. I archived the email without responding. Here's the thing, I don't think Tom scheduled that termination email because he was evil. I think he was just a bad manager who treated people poorly and got caught in the most karmic way possible. He was going to fire me at the end of a double shift I'd worked as a favor to him. That's who he was as a boss. The heart attack just made it impossible to hide from the consequences. I'm doing great now. Better job, better pay, better management. My current boss actually appreciates good work. The company I'm at treats employees like humans. It's a completely different experience. And Tom? He survived the heart attack, obviously. Has to take medication for his heart condition. Still works at what's left of Consolidated Transport. Still has to live with being the guy who fired the employee who saved his life. Every time someone Googles his name or the company name, that story comes up. Sometimes karma doesn't need elaborate planning. Sometimes it just needs good timing and a news cycle hungry for stories about corporate cruelty. Bad bosses are common, but when your trusted mentor becomes your worst nightmare, the betrayal cuts deeper than any job loss. I spent 4 years of my life developing a renewable energy prototype. It was a more efficient solar panel design that used a specific configuration of photovoltaic cells combined with a heat capture system. The idea was to maximize energy output while minimizing material costs. It wasn't going to change the world overnight, but it was genuinely innovative, something that could make solar energy more accessible and affordable. I was working on it through grad school and then independently after I graduated. My mentor, a guy named Dr. Richard Voss, was a professor in the engineering department and a respected figure in renewable energy circles. He'd published papers, consulted for major companies, had all the credentials. When I started developing my prototype, he offered to advise me, said he believed in the project and wanted to help me succeed. I was grateful. Having someone with his reputation backing me felt like a huge advantage. He reviewed my designs, gave feedback, helped me troubleshoot technical problems. He introduced me to people in the industry. He even connected me with potential investors when I was ready to start looking for funding. I trusted him completely. We had regular meetings where I'd show him my progress, updated schematics, test results, efficiency calculations. He was always encouraging, always telling me I was onto something significant. He'd suggest minor tweaks here and there, optimization ideas, but the core design was mine. I documented everything, kept detailed logs of my development process, saved all my drafts with timestamps, backed everything up on multiple drives. About 6 months ago, I took a vacation. First real break I'd had in years. 2 weeks in Costa Rica with my girlfriend. I'd been working non-stop and needed to step away from the project for a bit. Dr. Voss knew I was going. We talked about it. He'd encouraged me to take the time off, said I deserved it. I was on a beach with no cell service when it happened. When I got back to my hotel and checked my phone, I had about 30 missed calls and twice as many texts. Friends, former classmates, people from grad school, all asking variations of the same question. Did you see Dr. Voss's announcement? Is that your design? I had no idea what they were talking about. I pulled up TechCrunch and there it was, a feature article about Dr. Richard Voss unveiling his revolutionary new solar panel technology. There were photos of him at a press conference, diagrams of the technology, and I recognized every single detail because they were my diagrams, my design, my 4 years of work. He'd changed minor things, tweaked some measurements, adjusted the configuration slightly, used different terminology in places, but it was fundamentally my invention. The core innovation, the specific way the cells were arranged, the heat capture integration, all of it was what I'd developed and shown him over dozens of meetings. I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. I couldn't breathe. I sat in that hotel room reading the article over and over, looking at my designs presented as his breakthrough innovation. The article said he'd been working on it for 3 years, said he was in talks with major investors, said his company, which apparently he'd founded specifically for this, was valued at $12 million based on the technology. I cut my vacation short, flew home the next day, went straight to the patent office website and searched. He'd filed a patent application 2 months earlier, while I was still meeting with him regularly, still showing him my progress, still trusting him. The patent listed him as the sole inventor. My name appeared nowhere. That's when everything unraveled for me emotionally. I called him. He didn't answer. I emailed him. No response. I showed up at his office. His assistant said he wasn't available. I tried for a week to get him to talk to me. Finally, he sent an email. It was cold and formal, said that while I'd done some preliminary work on related concepts, the patented technology was his own independent development. Said any similarities were coincidental. Said if I made any public accusations, I'd be opening myself up to legal liability. I contacted patent lawyers, explained the situation, showed them my documentation. They all said the same thing. Yes, I had a case. Yes, it looked like he'd stolen my work, but fighting it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Patent litigation is expensive and slow. Even if I won, it could take years. And Dr. Voss had resources now. He had investor money. He could afford to drag it out and bleed me dry on legal fees. I didn't have hundreds of thousands of dollars. I had student loans and a part-time job. I couldn't afford to fight him in court. So I did something else. I compiled everything, every draft of my designs from the last 4 years, every email exchange with Dr. Voss, where I'd shared updates and he'd provided feedback, every development log with timestamps showing exactly when I'd created each iteration, every test result, every calculation. I organized it all chronologically to show the clear progression of my work and how it led to the final design he'd patented. Then I wrote a detailed Medium post, explained the whole story, showed the evidence, posted side by side comparisons of my original designs and his patent diagrams, included screenshots of emails where he was literally commenting on my schematics, the same schematics he later claimed were his independent development. I titled it How My Mentor Stole 4 Years of My Work and called it his own. I published it on a Friday night. By Saturday morning it had 10,000 views. By Sunday it was at 100,000. By Monday it was everywhere. Reddit, Twitter, LinkedIn, tech news sites. People were furious. The renewable energy community is relatively small and tight-knit. Dr. Voss was a known figure, and now everyone in the industry was seeing documented proof that he'd stolen a grad student's work. And here's where it gets absurd for him. The investors started asking questions. The article had included enough technical detail and evidence that they couldn't ignore it. They launched their own investigation, brought in independent experts to review my documentation and compare it to Dr. Voss's patent. The experts confirmed what I'd been saying. The core technology was clearly developed by me over a period of years, and Dr. Voss's patent was derivative of my work. The investors pulled out, all of them. 12 million in funding vanished. Dr. Voss's company, which existed solely to commercialize the stolen technology, collapsed before it ever produced anything. The university where he taught launched an ethics investigation. His colleagues distanced themselves. Conference invitations were rescinded. Then he sued me for defamation. Big mistake on his part, because defamation requires proving that what I said was false. And I had 4 years of time-stamped documentation proving everything I'd said was true. His lawyers tried to argue that I was damaging his reputation and career. My lawyer pointed out that he'd damaged his own reputation by committing academic fraud and theft of intellectual property. The case went to court. I brought my evidence, emails, drafts, logs, everything. His legal team tried to claim that my work was derivative of his earlier research, but they couldn't produce any documentation supporting that. They tried to claim the similarities were coincidental. The judge didn't buy it. My documentation was too detailed, too comprehensive. The timeline was too clear. I won. The judge dismissed his defamation claim and ordered him to pay my legal fees. More importantly, the ruling established a legal record that my version of events was accurate, that he had in fact stolen my work. Things went from bad to unhinged for his entire career after that. The university fired him, revoked his tenure, his published papers came under scrutiny, and people started questioning whether he'd stolen other people's work over the years. His professional reputation was completely destroyed. He's blacklisted from the industry now, Can't get hired anywhere reputable. Last I heard, he's doing contract consulting work for small firms and barely scraping by. Meanwhile, I rebuilt, started over with my prototype. I still owned the actual physical device and all my original research. His patent was just paper, and after the lawsuit, several investors who'd followed the story reached out to me directly. They wanted to fund the real inventor. I founded my own company 6 months ago, just closed a Series A funding round for $2.3 million. We're in production now. My solar panels are going to market next year, and they'll have my name on them, not his. Dr. Voss tried to reach out a few months ago, sent an email apologizing, saying he'd made a terrible mistake, that the pressure of academic life had clouded his judgment. I didn't respond. There's nothing he can say that matters at this point. He had a respected career and he destroyed it by trying to steal from someone who trusted him. The renewable energy community has been incredibly supportive. People remember what he did. They also remember that I had the receipts and wasn't afraid to use them. I've gotten speaking invitations, collaboration offers, media attention. The story of how I took down the mentor who stole my work became almost as well known as the technology itself. And honestly, I'm glad it happened the way it did. If I'd had the money to fight him in court initially, it would have been a quiet legal battle that most people never heard about. By going public, by showing everyone exactly what he'd done with documented proof, I made it impossible for him to hide. I turned his theft into a cautionary tale that everyone in the industry knows. The best part is knowing that my technology is moving forward under my name, built by my company, funded by investors who believe in me. Everything he tried to steal is succeeding without him. That's better than any legal victory. Workplace betrayals are one thing, but when romance takes a turn into psychological warfare, reality becomes stranger than fiction. I got engaged to my fiancé Ryan 2 years ago. We'd been together for 4 years at that point, lived together for 2, had a dog, the whole domestic partnership thing. His family seemed nice enough when I met them. His dad was quiet and kind. His mum, Patricia, was intense, but I figured that was just her personality. She asked a lot of questions, had strong opinions about everything, but she was polite to me. I thought we had a decent relationship. Ryan and I set a wedding date about a year out, started planning. Nothing fancy, just a simple ceremony and reception with close family and friends. Patricia immediately inserted herself into every decision. She had opinions about the venue, the caterer, the flowers, my dress. Ryan told me she was just excited, that she'd always dreamed of her son's wedding. I tried to be understanding. She was losing her baby boy to marriage or whatever psychological thing happens with some mothers and sons. 3 months before the wedding, things got weird. This guy started showing up everywhere I went. And I mean everywhere. At my gym, where I'd been going to the same classes for years. At my regular coffee shop. At my book club, which met at a local library once a month. Even at the grocery store I always shopped at. He was incredibly attractive. Tall, fit, great smile, well-dressed. The kind of guy who turns heads. At first, I thought it was coincidence. It's a small city. People overlap, but he always seemed to position himself near me. At the gym, he'd use the machine next to mine even when other ones were open. At the coffee shop, he'd stand behind me in line and make small talk. At book club, he suddenly joined and coincidentally loved the same genres I did. He was charming, funny, flirty in a way that felt flattering but not aggressive. His name was Marcus. He worked in marketing, or so he said. He was new to the area, didn't know many people yet. He asked for my number at the coffee shop one day, said he'd love to grab dinner sometime. I told him I was engaged, showed him my ring. He smiled and said that was too bad, that I seemed really interesting. But he kept showing up, kept being friendly, kept finding reasons to talk to me. I'm not going to lie and say I wasn't tempted. He was objectively attractive and charming and paying attention to me during a stressful time when wedding planning had made Ryan and me snippy with each other. But I loved Ryan. I was 3 months from marrying him. I wasn't going to throw that away for some random guy who flirted with me at the gym. I mentioned Marcus to Ryan casually. Just said there was this friendly guy who kept showing up at places I went. Ryan didn't seem concerned. Said it was probably just coincidence that I was attractive, and guys noticed. I let it go. Then one night I was at a bar with friends for a bachelorette planning session. Marcus showed up. He was clearly drunk. He saw me, came over, and his whole demeanor was different. Anxious, guilty. He asked if we could talk privately. My friends gave me looks, but I said it was fine, that I'd be right back. We stepped outside. That's when everything unraveled. Marcus told me he'd been hired, paid to seduce me, to get me to cheat on Ryan, or at least to get compromising photos or videos that could be used to prove I was unfaithful. He said he'd been doing it for 6 weeks and felt terrible about it, that he'd initially thought it was just some weird, jealous ex situation. But the more he got to know me, the more he realized I was a good person who didn't deserve this. He said he was drunk enough to finally have the courage to tell me the truth. I asked who hired him. He said my future mother-in-law, Patricia. I didn't believe him at first, it sounded insane, but he pulled out his phone and showed me everything. A contract. Actual paperwork hiring him through some kind of private investigation service that offered honeypot operations. Text messages from Patricia with instructions about where I'd be and when. Photos she'd sent him of me so he'd recognize me. She'd given him my schedule, my gym, my coffee shop, my book club. She'd been tracking my movements and feeding him the information. The contract specified he was supposed to seduce me and document it. If he could get me to cheat, he'd receive a bonus. If he could at least get flirtatious photos or videos, that would suffice. The goal was to prove to Ryan that I was unworthy of marrying into their family, that I couldn't be trusted. I felt sick. This woman had hired someone to destroy my relationship with her son, had paid money to try to make me cheat so she could call off the wedding. I asked Marcus why he was telling me. He said because it was wrong. He said he'd done this kind of work before for suspicious spouses trying to test their partners, and he'd always felt somewhat justified. But this was different. This was a parent trying to sabotage her son's happiness. He couldn't go through with it. I asked him to send me everything. The contract, the texts, all of it. He did. Right there. Forwarded it all to my email. Then I asked if I could record him explaining the situation. He agreed. I recorded a 10-minute conversation where he laid out everything. Who hired him, what the job was, how long it had been going on, all of it. Then I thanked him and went back inside. My friends asked if I was okay. I said I'd explain later. I needed to figure out how to handle this. I spent 2 days debating what to do. Part of me wanted to confront Patricia privately, but I knew she'd deny it. She'd call Marcus a liar. She'd twist it somehow. I needed to expose her in a way she couldn't escape. So I waited until the rehearsal dinner, 2 nights before the wedding. Both families were there. Ryan's extended family, my family, the wedding party, about 40 people total. Patricia had insisted on hosting it at her house. She'd been cooking for days, playing the gracious mother of the groom. We did the actual rehearsal at the venue that afternoon. Everything went fine. Then everyone came back to Patricia's house for dinner. She gave a toast, talked about how proud she was of Ryan, how she'd always dreamed of this day, how she hoped he'd found someone worthy of him. She looked directly at me when she said that last part. And here's where it gets absurd. I stood up, said I wanted to share something before we went any further with the wedding celebrations. Ryan looked confused. I pulled out my phone. I said that 3 months ago, Patricia had hired someone to seduce me, to try to get me to cheat on Ryan so she could prove I wasn't worthy of marrying her son. The room went completely silent. Patricia immediately denied it, said I was insane, said she had no idea what I was talking about. She looked at Ryan for support. He looked between us, clearly lost. I played the recording, Marcus's voice explaining everything, the contract, the payments, Patricia's instructions, her text messages giving him my schedule. 10 minutes of detailed confession. I'd connected my phone to a Bluetooth speaker earlier, under the pretense of wanting to play music. Everyone heard every word. Patricia's face went white. She tried to speak, but nothing came out. Ryan stood up and asked if it was true. She started crying, said she'd only wanted to protect him, that she didn't trust me, that she needed to know I was loyal before he made the biggest mistake of his life. Ryan lost it, started yelling, asked how she could do something so manipulative and cruel. His dad looked horrified. My parents looked furious. The room erupted in arguments, people taking sides, demanding explanations. Patricia tried to leave, but Ryan blocked her, demanded she admit what she'd done in front of everyone. She finally broke down and confessed, said she'd hired Marcus, said she thought she was protecting her son, said she'd made a mistake, but only because she loved Ryan so much. She tried to hug him. He stepped away. Things went from bad to unhinged after that initial confession. Ryan told her to leave, His own mother told her to get out of her own house during the rehearsal dinner she'd hosted. His dad tried to mediate, but Ryan wasn't having it. He said if she stayed, he was leaving. She left, just grabbed her purse and walked out crying. His dad followed her. The rehearsal dinner was over. We almost called off the wedding. Ryan was devastated, humiliated, angry at his mother, angry at himself for not seeing how controlling she was. I told him we should postpone. He said no. He said getting married was his decision, not hers, and he wasn't letting her sabotage it even after everything she'd done. We got married 2 days later. Patricia wasn't there. Ryan's dad came but sat in the back. Most of Ryan's extended family came, but it was tense. Everyone knew what had happened. The wedding was beautiful, but there was this cloud over it that shouldn't have been there. We went on our honeymoon. When we came back, Patricia had left probably 15 voicemails and sent dozens of texts, all apologizing, all begging Ryan to forgive her, all saying she'd made a terrible mistake. Ryan blocked her number. She started using other family members as messengers, his aunts and uncles calling to say she was sorry, that family was important, that we should forgive her. Ryan told them all the same thing. What she did was unforgivable. She'd tried to destroy his marriage before it even started. There was no coming back from that. 6 months after the wedding, we moved to a different state. Ryan got a job offer and we took it partly for the opportunity, but mostly to get away from Patricia's attempts to reinsert herself into our lives. We bought a house, made new friends, started fresh. Patricia tried to visit once, just showed up at our new house unannounced. Ryan answered the door, told her to leave, and closed it in her face. She sat in her car outside for 2 hours before finally driving away. We installed security cameras after that. She hasn't tried again. It's been 3 years now. We're happy. We have good lives. Ryan talks to his dad occasionally, but has made it clear Patricia isn't welcome in any part of our future. No holidays, no birthdays, nothing. When we have kids someday, she won't meet them. That's the consequence of trying to manipulate your son's life to that degree. Some family members think we're being too harsh, that she made a mistake and we should forgive her. But hiring someone to seduce your future daughter-in-law isn't a mistake. It's a calculated, extended attempt at sabotage. It's not something you do in a moment of poor judgment. It's something you plan and pay for and actively coordinate over weeks. So no, she doesn't get forgiveness. She doesn't get access to our lives. She made her choice when she hired Marcus. We made ours when we cut her out completely. Manipulative in-laws are exhausting, but this next story involves a relationship violation so bizarre, therapists couldn't even categorize it properly. I dated a guy named Connor in college. We were together for about a year and a half. It started out fine but deteriorated fast. He was controlling, jealous, constantly accused me of cheating when I wasn't. He'd go through my phone, show up at my classes unannounced to check on me, get angry if I spent time with friends without him. Classic toxic relationship stuff. I finally broke up with him junior year. It was messy. He cried, begged me to stay, then got angry and told me I'd regret it. I blocked him on everything and moved on with my life. That was 5 years ago. I graduated, got a job in marketing, moved to a different city, built a completely separate life. I rarely thought about Connor. He was just a bad relationship from my past that I'd learned from and left behind. Then a friend sent me a TikTok link with a message that just said, "Is this about you?" I clicked it. The account had 100,000 followers. The username was something like exposing toxic people. The profile picture was a silhouette, no face visible. I scrolled through the videos. They were all about me, my full name, details about my life, my job, where I lived, my appearance. They were vicious. The videos called me manipulative, abusive, a liar. They told completely fabricated stories about things I'd supposedly done. One video claimed I'd cheated on my boyfriend with multiple people and gaslit him about it. Another said I'd stolen money from him. Another said I'd physically attacked him during arguments. None of it was true. Not a single thing. But the comments believed it. Thousands of comments calling me terrible names, saying I deserved to be exposed, hoping bad things would happen to me. The account had built an entire following around hating me. 100,000 people who'd never met me but had been convinced I was a monster. I kept scrolling, feeling sicker with every video. One talked about my job, said I'd gotten it by sleeping with my boss. Completely false. Another made fun of my appearance, posted old photos of me from college, and pointed out everything wrong with how I looked. Another mentioned my grandmother who'd passed away 2 years ago and made cruel jokes about her death. The creator's face was never shown. They used a voice filter so I couldn't identify them by sound, but the details were too specific. They knew things about my life that only someone close to me would know. Old inside jokes, specific places I'd been, names of my friends and family members. And then I saw it. One video mentioned a specific restaurant Connor and I used to go to. A place we'd gone on our first date. A detail that wouldn't mean anything to most people but confirmed what I already suspected. This was Connor, my ex from 5 years ago, still obsessed with me, still angry that I'd left him. He'd built an entire social media presence around destroying my reputation. That's when everything unraveled for my sense of safety. I started getting messages, friend requests from strangers who'd seen the account, messages calling me names, telling me I deserved to suffer. Someone found my work email and sent threats. Someone else found my address, I don't know how, and sent photos of my apartment building with captions about knowing where I lived. I was terrified. I reported the account to TikTok. They said it didn't violate their community guidelines. I reported individual videos. Same response. Apparently calling someone abusive and posting their personal information wasn't enough to get content removed. I documented everything, screenshotted every video, every comment, every threatening message I received. I created a folder with hundreds of pieces of evidence. Then I hired a lawyer, a good one who specialized in online harassment and defamation. We filed a lawsuit against Connor. My lawyer said we had a strong case. The videos made specific false claims that damaged my reputation. They'd caused me emotional distress and put me in danger by exposing my personal information to a hostile audience. And because Connor had built a following and likely made money from the account through TikTok's creator fund, there were actual damages to recover. Connor tried to hide behind anonymity, claimed the account wasn't his. But during discovery, we subpoenaed TikTok for the account information. The email it was registered to was one Connor had used in college. The IP addresses where videos were uploaded matched his location. Phone records showed he'd been accessing TikTok at the exact times videos were posted. We had him. But that wasn't even the worst part. While investigating, my lawyer found something else. Connor had been catfishing people pretending to be me. He'd created fake profiles on LinkedIn and other professional sites using my name and photos. He'd sent messages to people in my industry saying inappropriate things, trying to damage my professional reputation. He'd reached out to my coworkers pretending to be me and saying things that could have gotten me fired. He'd been running a multi-platform harassment campaign for years. The TikTok account was just the most visible part. He'd been actively trying to destroy every aspect of my life because I'd broken up with him half a decade ago. The evidence was overwhelming. We went to court. Connor's lawyer tried to argue that the TikTok videos were opinion and protected speech. My lawyer pointed out that calling someone abusive and making specific false accusations about criminal behavior wasn't opinion, it was defamation. Connor tried to claim he'd been the real victim in our relationship and was just sharing his truth. We showed the court my evidence from when we dated, text messages where he was controlling and jealous, testimony from friends who'd witnessed his behavior, proof that his claims were fabricated. The judge wasn't sympathetic to Connor, ruled in my favor on every count: defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, identity theft for the catfishing, awarded me $250,000 in damages, ordered Connor to delete all content related to me, post a public apology acknowledging that his claims were false, and cease all contact with me permanently. Connor's public apology went up on the TikTok account. It was brief and clearly written by his lawyer. Said he'd made false statements, that I'd never done the things he accused me of, that he apologized for the harm caused. The comments section exploded. His followers turned on him immediately, called him a liar and a stalker. People who'd spent months hating me suddenly realized they'd been manipulated. The account lost thousands of followers within hours. Connor deleted everything like the court ordered. The TikTok account, the fake LinkedIn profiles, all of it. But screenshots had already circulated. His name was now attached to the story. Future employers would find it. People in his life knew what he'd done. He filed for bankruptcy to try to avoid paying the judgment. My lawyer said that was common in cases like this. that we might never see the money. I told her I didn't care about the money. I cared about stopping him and making sure there was a legal record of what he'd done. I ended up receiving about $40,000 after his bankruptcy proceedings. Not the full amount, but something. I donated all of it to a domestic violence and harassment charity. Felt like the right thing to do. Connor tried to reach out once after everything was finalized, sent an email from a new address apologizing again, saying he'd been in a dark place, that he knew what he'd done was wrong. I forwarded it to my lawyer without responding. The court order said no contact. The email was a violation. My lawyer sent his lawyer a letter reminding him of the consequences if he tried again. I haven't heard from him since. My life slowly returned to normal. The harassment stopped. The threatening messages stopped. I changed my privacy settings on everything, locked down my social media, became much more careful about what I shared online. It's been 2 years now, and I still get occasional messages from people who saw the old videos before they were deleted, but they're rare. The whole experience taught me that you can never really escape some people, that someone you dated briefly in college can carry that resentment for years and turn it into a weapon. That social media makes it easier than ever to destroy someone's reputation with lies, and that fighting back, even when it's expensive and exhausting, is sometimes the only option. Connor's followers moved on to other drama. The internet has a short memory, but the legal judgment is permanent. If he ever tries anything like this again, with me or anyone else, there's a record now. A court document saying exactly what he did and what he's capable of. I hope he got help. I hope he realized how destructive his obsession was. But mostly, I just hope I never hear from him or about him again. And finally, imagine thinking you escaped a toxic situation, only to discover your neighbor turned your worst day into their personal vendetta. I had a golden retriever named Daisy. She was 7 years old, the sweetest dog you'd ever meet. Never aggressive, never mean, just a happy golden who loved everyone. She was my best friend. I'd gotten her right after college, and she'd been with me through job changes, breakups, moving cities, everything. She was family. My neighbor, a guy named Greg, moved in next door about 2 years ago with his wife and 2 young kids. The kids were loud and rowdy, which was fine. Kids are kids, but they'd run around the backyard screaming, throw balls over the fence into my yard, that kind of thing. Daisy would bark sometimes when they got particularly loud right near our shared fence. Just normal dog barking. Nothing excessive. Nothing that happened late at night or early morning. Just daytime barking when kids were being loud directly next to her. Greg hated it. He'd yell at me over the fence to control my dog. I tried explaining that she was just reacting to noise, that she wasn't barking at nothing. He didn't care. Said his kids should be able to play in their own yard without some dog harassing them. I pointed out that Daisy was also in her own yard and had just as much right to be there. He told me to keep her inside or get rid of her. One afternoon his kids were playing near the fence and one of them stuck his hand through trying to pet Daisy. She barked once, just once, startled by the sudden hand. Didn't bite, didn't lunge, just barked. The kid pulled his hand back and was fine, but Greg came storming over to my front door, screaming that my vicious dog had attacked his son. I told him that wasn't what happened, that his kid had startled her. He said if my dog ever came near his kids again, there would be consequences. I installed a security camera pointed at my backyard after that. Something felt off about his threat. 2 weeks later, Daisy got sick. Started vomiting, couldn't keep food down, lethargic. I rushed her to the emergency vet. They ran tests, found rat poison in her system, a lot of it. They tried to save her, but the damage was too severe. She died on the exam table while I held her and cried. The vet gave me documentation of the poisoning. I went home and checked my security footage. There it was, clear as day. Greg reaching over the fence and tossing something into my yard. Daisy going over to investigate and eating whatever it was. Him watching to make sure she ate it, then walking back into his house. He'd poisoned my dog, deliberately, because she'd barked at his kids. I called the police, showed them the footage. They went to talk to Greg. He denied it at first, then admitted he'd thrown rat poison over the fence, but claimed it was an accident. Said he was dealing with a rodent problem and didn't realize it would land where my dog could get it. The police didn't buy it, but said it was a misdemeanor animal cruelty charge at most. They issued him a citation, $500 fine, $500 for killing my dog. I saw him a few days later getting his mail. He smirked at me, actually smirked, like he'd gotten away with something and was proud of it. I didn't say anything, just went back inside. But I was destroyed. Daisy was gone and this man had murdered her and faced essentially no consequences. I couldn't let it go. I know some people would say, move on, get another dog, don't let it consume you. But I couldn't. Every time I looked at my backyard, I saw where she used to play. Every time I heard Greg's kids laughing, I thought about how he'd killed my dog because she dared to bark at them. The injustice of it ate at me. So I started researching property law, zoning codes, building permits, municipal ordinances. I spent hours every night reading through city regulations and county codes. I became obsessed with understanding every legal rule that governed residential properties in our area. And that's when everything unraveled for Greg. His house had a large addition on the back, a new master suite that extended out into what used to be part of his backyard. It was beautiful, obviously expensive. He'd had it built about a year ago. I'd seen the construction happening. It looked professional. But as I dug through property records and permit databases, I realized something. The addition violated multiple zoning codes. It was too close to the property line. It exceeded the maximum lot coverage for our zoning district. The setback from the rear property line was insufficient, and when I really got into it, I found that the permits on file didn't match what had actually been built. He'd gotten approval for a smaller addition and then built something significantly larger. I measured everything, used property line markers, compared the building plans filed with the city to what actually existed. I documented every violation I could find. There were 6 major ones, 6 ways his dream addition violated city codes and regulations. I filed complaints, not just one complaint to one department. I filed separate detailed complaints with the zoning board, the building inspection office, code enforcement, the planning department. I made sure every relevant city agency knew about the violations. I included photos, measurements, copies of the original permits, everything. Inspectors started showing up at Greg's house, multiple inspectors from different departments. He tried to explain, tried to say everything was permitted and legal. They measured, they compared, they took photos, then they issued violation notices. Greg got a letter from the city. His addition was not in compliance with zoning regulations, and the permits on file didn't match the construction. He had 30 days to bring it into compliance or face penalties. He tried to argue, hired a lawyer, filed appeals, but the evidence was clear. He'd built an unpermitted addition that violated codes. Then came the breaking point for his entire financial situation. The city issued a demolition order. The addition had to be removed, not modified, not brought into compliance. The violations were too extensive. The entire structure needed to come down. $200,000 worth of construction. Gone. Greg tried everything. He appealed to the zoning board. Denied. He tried to get variances retroactively. Denied. He claimed the city had made errors in their inspection. They hadn't. Every measurement, every code citation, every violation was documented and correct, because I'd made sure of it. He tried suing me, said I was harassing him, that I'd filed frivolous complaints to get revenge over the dog situation. His lawyer sent me threatening letters. I forwarded them to my own lawyer, who pointed out that I'd followed every legal channel perfectly. Filing legitimate complaints about actual code violations wasn't harassment. It was civic engagement. The lawsuit went nowhere. The demolition happened on a Tuesday. I watched from my window as contractors tore down Greg's beautiful master suite addition. Every wall, every window, every bit of custom work. Reduced to rubble and hauled away. His wife stood in the driveway crying. Greg looked like he'd aged 10 years. Things went from bad to unhinged after the financial hit. His wife divorced him. I heard through neighborhood gossip that she blamed him for the financial disaster. They'd taken out a loan for the addition. Now they had debt and nothing to show for it. Their marriage couldn't survive that stress on top of everything else. She moved out with the kids within 2 months. Greg tried to sell the house, but the property had a record of the violations on file. It affected the value. He ended up selling for way less than what he'd paid. Lost money on the house itself, plus the cost of the addition, plus the demolition, plus the legal fees. He moved away last month. I saw the moving truck. He didn't look at my house, didn't say goodbye to anyone on the street. Just left. After he was gone, I did something for Daisy. I planted a memorial garden in my backyard, right where she used to play, put in flowers, a small bench, a stone marker with her name on it. Every morning I go out there and water the plants, and I think about her, about how much she meant to me, about how she deserved better than to be poisoned by a cruel man who couldn't tolerate a dog barking. Some people might think I went too far, that destroying someone's financial life over a dog is excessive, but he didn't just kill my dog. He did it deliberately, callously, and then smirked about it when he got away with a slap on the wrist. He thought $500 was a fair price for murder. I made sure the real price was everything he'd built. The garden is beautiful now. Daisy would have loved it. And every time I water those flowers, every time I sit on that bench and look at where she used to run around happy and alive, I feel like maybe justice isn't always immediate, but it can be thorough. Sweet dreams, everyone, and remember, karma might take its time, but it always knows your address. If you made it through all 12 of these absolute disasters, you're my kind of chaos enthusiast. Hit that subscribe button if you want more unhinged Reddit drama, and drop a comment telling me which story haunted you the most. Until next time, stay safe out there, because apparently anyone could be secretly recording you, poisoning your lunch or building illegal additions next door. Sleep tight.